a very good afternoon to you all. Welcome to this Q&A on how to upweight your business's social value. So my name is Amy Lishman and I'm the Head of Member Engagement at Brighton Chamber. And I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so. I am absolutely delighted to be here today with Liam, Ronan-Chlond, Head of Engagement and Social Value at First Base. So First Base, for those of you that don't know, are a mixed-use developer. They are the owners of Edward Street Quarter, which is the 120 million redevelopment of the former Amex site in Brighton. And at the moment, they're implementing a massive amount of benefits, about £9 million worth of benefits to the city in its first year of construction. I visited the site on Friday, complete with my hard hat, high-vis safety boots and all other manner of PPE to have a tour of the site, and it's incredibly impressive. The views are spectacular, and it's going to be providing some brilliant high-quality office and co-working space, along with residential spaces and leisure spaces to eat, drink and meet, which I know after the year that we've all had, we're very excited about. So looking forward to that opening properly next year. So let's get started. So Liam, first question, big question. What is social value and why is it important for businesses of all sizes to consider and increase it or upweight it, as we phrased it?
Yes, it's a question I'm asked the most. And recently I was asked to explain how would I explain social value to a child? And the best way we could sort of drill it down to is measuring good things.
Yeah.
So it's but in adult language, it's sort of trying to sort of quantify public benefit, basically. So rather than just focusing on, I think traditionally businesses and particularly developers have sort of we found it we're very comfortable quantifying economic benefits, but we find it difficult to quantify benefits to people or environmental benefits. But if we don't do that, then how will anybody believe us when we say this will deliver public benefits to the local community and this will improve the local environment? So it helps us, it helps provide a system and a framework to sort of, a robust system to sort of demonstrate those tangible benefits to communities as well as the environment. And why is it important for business? Because it helps people believe you, because you've got proof. It helps you demonstrate the public benefit that you're delivering. So for us as a developer, we submit our social value statement as part of our planning application. So it's a public document for all to see. It can be scrutinised, and we can be held accountable as well for the aspirations and ambitions that we set out to achieve. And also that document is consulted upon, and then it's measured once we set out to deliver that document, and then it's reported on as well, so people can check progress on the delivery of that document. So at the Edward Street Quarter is a great example of that. So when we submitted our planning application for the Edward Street Quarter, it included a social value action plan, and that included a local needs analysis where our social value partners looked into the sort of local challenges, and I mean hyper-local challenges of that community, down to the ward level, not citywide. So specifically what challenges and opportunities lie within that community and how we can respond to those challenges through our site, how we can leverage, the huge investment that we're making into our site to improve local people's lives, whether that's through employment, skills, health, well-being, and the local environment. And I think it's interesting because it's not just developers. All businesses are doing this. People on this call may have heard of ESG. People on this call may have heard of B Corps. It seems to be measuring impact is the way that the wind's blowing. And if we don't settle upon an achievable sort of way that we can measure impact, then the future of capitalism looks pretty grim. And some people might not be bothered about that, but it's basically, we can't just carry on only measuring profit when the planet is dying and when there's it seems like there's rising inequality. The only way that we can respond to that, or that capitalism can respond to that, is by accounting for other forms of value, which is social value.
Yeah. Quick follow-up question on you were talking about that statement that you kind of provide as part of the planning application and things like that. How important is it to make the documents that you provide really accessible for people? You know, that it's not just reams and reams of very big corporate, you know, speak. How important is it, and how easy is it to kind of digest the information so that it is kind of readable for absolutely everyone, and they can really, you know, they can really scrutinize it as well?
It's difficult. I suppose I'll take a step back and sort of say that social value and impact in its wider sense is it's a maturing space. It's very early days. I'm part of the National Social Value Task Force, and one of the things that we have to keep reminding ourselves is that, you know, we're all learning, and a lot of people don't know what social value is. So it's really hard to talk to an audience where there's so many different levels of understanding of social value. And also there's so many measurement tools available for social value as well. It's quite messy, and it's all very experimental at the minute. Our approach is to have a public document as part of the planning application. We explain what social value is on our website, and how we're trying to, you know, set out and roughly what our action plans look like, and roughly what our what the outcomes are that we're seeking to improve, and we'll report on that as well in the local press, and on our website. But there's probably better ways, and hopefully what we're trying to do, and one of the reasons why I'm working with the UK Green Building Council and the National Social Value Task Force, is to share information and you know, use best practice. And I think anybody who's looking at social value for their business really needs to sort of do their research, because it's all in their infancy. It's all in its infancy at the minute. There's no right way of doing it, and there's probably a lot of wrong ways. But you know, it's what works for your business, what seems right, and hopefully, yeah, sharing best practice and trying to sort of get involved and communicate what you think you're doing well.
Yeah, brilliant. So would you, I mean, it sounds through what you just said as well that social value is quite low. It should be quite local and an individual. It's important to know that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely, because I think going back to the economic benefits before, I think when people used to do when developers used to do socio-economic impact reports, they'd report on the amount of, you know, local labour that was being employed on site. But that local labour was a workforce that, you know, from the southeast of England. So, you know, yeah, local in a national sense, but maybe not local in a Brighton sense. Whereas we measure local employment through the BN postcode. Mm-hmm. So if it's not a BN postcode, they're not local. Yeah. And you could, you know, perhaps you could even hone in further, you know, in the future, but we think that's a good start for now. Yeah. And there's plenty more ways you can do that. And the data's there as well to, you know, you can look at ward level data for any sort of policy wonks out there or sort of data geeks, that the information we tend to use is the indices of multiple deprivation. To particularly understand the challenges of an area. So, you know, for instance, if there's high levels of youth unemployment, what can we do to respond to that issue? If there's high levels of social isolation amongst older people, what can we do to respond to that issue? So rather than, you know, thinking, right, okay, we need some PR, let's throw some money at this charity and maybe they'll do some good things. Instead, you've got evidence-led sort of information where you can go, right, this is an issue locally. We can work with this charity to improve X, Y, and Z. Yeah,
I do wonder how many businesses do approach it from that point of view. There's so many reasons why people work with different charities, but I wonder whether it is led by the needs of the city. So I'll leave that there and move on to the next question. So you've talked a little bit about the benefits for businesses already, but can you go through a few more? You know, why should businesses consider this, and what are the benefits if they do?
Yeah, because it allows you to sort of walk the walk as well as talk the talk, and people can sort of, you know, it allows you to sort of prove that you're doing good things, and as well, it's a good habit to get into, you know, measuring measurement is a good habit to get into. I mean, we recently, so separate from social value, we become accredited with a Planet Mark status, and to get that we had to sort of measure, you know, our carbon emissions, the way that people travel to work, our supply chain for stationary procurement, things like that. This it's all good stuff to be doing anyway. We weren't doing that before. And you can review that information, and you can adapt and you know, make different choices as a business because you've got more, you know, data to influence those decisions. And that's another way that the wind is blowing, isn't it? With, you know, data is increasingly, you know, an important asset in terms of being able to drive clearer decision making.
Excellent. I've had a question come through about B Corps, and wondered whether, and that's very much, I think, this person's saying it's come from the US, but there's something called the UK Responsible Business Standards. Is that something you've come across? Or
There's loads. There's loads.
Yeah, sure.
Every time we have a meeting about it, somebody throws in, oh, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? So I think, yeah, there needs to be some convergence at some point with these accreditations, because yeah. I think there's not necessarily, I wouldn't say, okay, this accreditation is the best one, you should go for this. But what I'd look for in an accreditation is something that is almost going with an authority or an organization who are going to be tough on you and who are going to challenge you, because too easy, and especially sort of, you know, the last sort of 10, 20 years, there's been accreditations that you just pay for and then you've got it. Like, you know, you just sort of maybe have to give them some information on day one, pay some money, and then you've got an accreditation saying, I don't know, I'm a green business, you're a green business employer or something like that. Whereas with B Corp, they really challenge you, and you know, they'll kick you out. Planet Mark, that we're a member of now, if you don't meet the targets that you agreed to set out to achieve, you don't get a Planet Mark in 2022. So I think, you know, they're the ones that people should go with, the ones that really challenge you, and then they're the ones that are going to be, you know, still around in the future, because they have, you know, some respect, and people sort of, you know, look to them as a challenging, you know, kite mark for the industry. Brilliant,
thank you. I've had a couple of other questions come in, but I'm going to ask them probably at the end, just so we can move on to the next question. So what areas of the business should businesses focus on when developing a strategy for increasing social value in a business? How do you start? How do you go about that?
It's a good question. So firstly, it depends what your business is. Mm-hmm. But even for us, you know, we've got, you know, at least two ways of measuring social value at the minute. So we've got we measure social value corporately, you know, for First Base, and that's something that we're developing now. But on our projects, so Edward Street Quarter, for instance, we you know, employ social value strategies on that separately as well. So and then even within that, you're looking at you're having a different focus. So for instance, now during the construction phase, social value is all focused on employment, skills, you know, mitigating the impact on the community, and a real big focus on procurement as well, and supply chains, trying to sort of, you know, ethical and sustainable procurement and supply chains, and local as well. We've just signed up to something in Bristol called Buy Local, Buy Social, and that's sort of signing us up to really proactively trying to work with local businesses and social enterprises to try and get them into our supply chains, and being more proactive about it rather than just leaving it to the market, which doesn't necessarily always work.
I've had a question related to supply chains, actually, Liam, on you know, how, when with tendering, how do you ensure that you know, how do people, what do you look for in a good bid? You know, I'm sure it's not just about price, you know, and things like that. But yeah, what do you look for when tendering for kind of local work, I guess? That's a question that's come through.
I'm not the procurement lead, so I probably wouldn't be the best person to answer that. But I know that, you know, where we have got sort of procurement agreements like buy local, buy social. You know, that's a big, that sort of local focus is a big part. And also, you know, a commitment to delivering social value as well. So whether that's employing, you know, people who used to be in prison, whether that's employing, you know, people with disabilities, or you know, giving something back to the communities that they serve is definitely important on our procurement policy, our new procurement policy in Bristol. But for Brighton, which was set a few years previously, I think is quite different. But I know that a lot of procurement policies are going that way. And actually, for something that I used to find relatively boring, I think the more I've found out about procurement is how radical it can be in terms of making, you know, real interventions. So one of the things that we're actually doing in Bristol, I know this is about Brighton today, but fairly recently in Bristol, we've got a very diverse community around our site in Bristol, and they're really concerned about gentrification. And one of the things that we wanted to do to try and mitigate the impact on the local community was to work with local Black, Asian, minority, ethnic-owned businesses, whether that's to support them through networking and sort of, you know, procurement training. So then we could be proactive about trying to get them equipped to bid for tenders, so that they didn't just miss out. And then also trying to you know, support them to get on site as well. So we, you know, similar to the Edward Street quarter, we've got cafes, bars, space for pop-ups. You know, how can we support those businesses to sort of expand or move on to our new premises as well?
Absolutely.
So it plays quite an influential role.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that question kind of led you to talk a little bit about how much social value goes through all processes within your business in particular. And that it's a consideration in so many different areas. So that's fantastic.
Reminded, actually, I just remembered that there's a couple of links that might be useful for people who want to find out more about social value. We're members of Social Value UK, and their website has got a really interesting about what is social value, and they probably explain it much more clearer than me. But then also, there's some information from the UK Green Building Council for anyone who's involved in architecture or property or development. There's a toolkit that we recently worked on, basically to take people through what the best practice is currently of delivering social value for development, property development. So that's available on the UK Green Building Council's website as well.
Amazing. My colleague Laura will pop those links in the chat to have a look at. And, you know, like anything, I guess learning from different industries, although that's very unique to that particular sector, you know, I think, as you said earlier, everything being in its infancy means that, you know, we do need to learn from different sectors that are maybe a bit further ahead. So, you know, even if you're not in that sector, it's always worth looking through checklists like that to think, hang on a second, could this apply to my marketing business? You know, could this apply that way? So thanks for sharing, Liam. Fantastic. Thanks, Laura. Right. We have had a few other quite specific questions come through, so I will I'll get to those very shortly. I have seen them, but I just want to talk now with you, Liam, about measuring social value. So you mentioned that in the definition. How do you measure it, and how difficult is that?
Well, firstly, I don't measure it because it's really difficult. There's a link that's just popped up on the chat, which is the socialvalueportal.com national TOMS. And unlike Laura said earlier, it's not about TOMS or shoes. It's an acronym that stands for themes, outcomes and measurements. And that was designed by the architects of the Social Value Act from 2012. So it's the same methodology that's used by the Treasury and by the local government association. So, you know, it's well endorsed. So how do you measure it? You know, how do you measure happiness? How do you measure well-being? It's really difficult. And there's some really complex proxies to measure the benefits to society of somebody being employed, or the benefits to society of having cleaner air. And I don't pretend to understand that in minute detail, but yeah, we work with a social enterprise actually called the Social Value Portal, and it's their website that explains what the national TOMS is. And yeah, what they do is essentially accounting for public benefit. So, you know, rather than sort of accounting for finance, they look at how you can sort of report and measure upon the benefits to society. It's really difficult. It's moving. There's other ways of measuring and reporting, but that's what we use. We use the themes, outcomes, and measurements. And yeah, there's different ways to measure as well. And I think the Social Value UK website has different measurement systems. But I think most public procurement sort of social value frameworks and most built environment social value frameworks use the national TOMs.
Yeah, thanks, Liam. In terms of challenges, I mean, we've already kind of talked a little bit around these, you know, it's a big subject, it's a new subject, so there's a lot that's unknown. And you know, so what would you say are the biggest challenges for businesses who are starting to think about making changes and kind of putting social value at the heart of their business? Have you got any tips for overcoming these? Has First Base, you know, come across any of these challenges, and what have you done to mitigate those?
So yeah, do your research is one, but I've sort of covered that already. There's a lot out there, so you know, do have a look around. But top-down leadership, I'd say, is the most important. I think it's difficult enough to deliver social value with senior support, let alone without. So I imagine it's impossible, and it needs to be taken seriously because it's such a, you know, it's so easy to be cynical about social value and just go, oh, what does it really mean? You know, how do you even measure it? I've never heard of it before. Is this sort of like, you know, some way that businesses are using to sort of, you know, mitigate the negative things that they're doing? It's potentially, you know, revolutionary in terms of the public benefit that it can deliver. But it really needs, yeah, top-down leadership to push it through an organisation. And I'd say the bigger the organisation, the more senior it needs to be. It needs to be driven. It's the benefit for us is that our investors take it really seriously, because that would be a challenge if our investors didn't take it seriously, because then we'd be saying, you know, we've got this part of the budget for social value, and they'd be going, what is that really? Is it just a sort of a new word for CSR? Or is it, you know, a new word for PR? We're not going to take it seriously. But luckily, we're working with some enlightened investors who have got ESG portfolios, and you know, they're committed to achieving real social change, and you know, they're very aware of the climate crisis. So you know, the fact that we're delivering social value, they're very impressed with, and they want to work with us. So that's great. But if they didn't, that would be a challenge. So yeah, leadership's really important, and also partnership and consultation. And just sort of, you know, working with each other to share best practice and information. Like I said before, you know, I think for me, joining organisations like Social Value UK, the UK Green Building Council, and working with the Social Value Portal, and really sort of, you know, learning. I went on a social value practitioner course recently that Social Value UK ran. I realised that I definitely can't be a professional social value practitioner because it's very, very difficult. But yeah, so really sort of sharing information, researching, and also it's about people. So consultation and engagement is really important. So whenever you're sort of thinking about, right, okay, what does my strategy look like? It needs to be in consultation with, if it's a workplace assessment, it needs to be in consultation with your fellow employees. If it's a, you know, a built environment social value project, it needs to be in consultation with the local community, etc., etc. You need sort of buy-in, and you need feedback to help shape what that sort of social value framework looks like, because you need to understand what the outcomes are that you need to improve. So you really need to sort of talk to people and do your research in that respect as well.
When you're in these groups, Liam, are there a real mixture of business sectors, you know, or I appreciate perhaps for the building one, not so much, but Social Value UK, are there, you know, real variety of sectors involved, or are you seeing a concentration in perhaps yours?
Widespread, but it tends to be at the minute it tends to be infrastructure, built environment, and procurement.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, you know, public sector procurement. But I think that'll change. I think it's because the budgets are bigger,
yeah,
and the scrutiny is bigger.
yeah.
Let's face it. Trust in developers is probably at an historic low.
Mm-hmm.
So like we know we need to, work really hard to demonstrate, the public benefit of what we're doing. And I think it's the same for, big infrastructure projects, HS2, for instance.
Yeah.
Or public procurement, for councils, they need to demonstrate that they're supporting their community and they're supporting local businesses and they're supporting local people through the investment that they make into running their services.
Yeah.
I think that's been a key driver so far. But like I said at the start, I think if our economic model is not sustainable, and if this is a way out, basically a nice way out where we can sort of potentially, capitalism can potentially carry on in a sort of in a transformed way where it shows the benefit to the environment and the benefit to people. Yeah. But then also you can see the negative impact as well, that some decisions have on the planet and some decisions have on people. But if you don't measure, you don't see.
Yeah. So. I wouldn't be surprised if that your cohort's almost then joined by tech companies and thinking about the impact of that on society, and the negative and the positive. And I wonder whether there probably is a movement to broaden people involved in those communities, given the way that society is kind of going. I think certainly a lot of people are talking now about carbon negative, carbon neutral, and certainly I think there's a similar there's a lot of how to put it, there's a lot of different standards and lots of different things that people go to, and I think maybe a standardization and a coming together of larger players and smaller will be of benefit to the cause in the long run. So fantastic.
I think there'll be a convergence as well between sort of social value and the sustainability movement and space as well. So previously just talking about development projects, but 10 years ago you'd have social value. I think I only started working with social value 10 years ago, but social value consultants were very rare. So you'd have your social value consultant that basically be just looking at the impact on the local community and jobs and employment. And then you'd have your sustainability consultant who'd just be looking at the energy efficiency of the building. But over that time, the sustainability consultants are now more interested in health, happiness, well-being, and the role that the environment can play in that, biodiversity, etc. And the social value consultants are now looking a lot more at the environmental benefits and that a building a new development can create, whether that's through sustainable travel and transport, air quality, again biodiversity, and the impact on local people and health, happiness. So it does seem that I reckon in 10 years time they'll be the same consultants. Yeah. And I don't even think we'll need a consultant, because we won't need someone there to remind us that these things are important. Hopefully it'll be embedded.
Yeah.
The importance and that focus will be embedded across the project team.
Yeah, absolutely. We had one question come through, which is, and I think we've been talking around some of the groups that are helping, but just to see if you know anybody else. Is anyone working with businesses in different sectors so that they can understand how their industry can deliver social value? The feeling that we have is that some sectors just have no idea what to do and where to go and where to start. Is there any other bits of advice that you might offer in addition to what you've said, or is it just through conversations that you're having and sharing and learning? Still sharing and research is really important. But I'd actually say, going back to that sort of convergence point, that B Corp, for instance, they really take social value seriously as part of their. I know it seems to be more of a focus on the environment and sustainability, but social value is a big factor in B Corp's accreditation, and Planet Mark that we use as well. Social value is a big part of that. So I think it doesn't necessarily have to be. Social value can be covered by sustainability accreditations as well, and sustainability frameworks. Yeah. Fantastic. I wondered, just a final question that we prepared. have you got any examples of kind of small changes that perhaps First Base has made, or that you've seen in the community that you're involved in, that have had a big impact? So things that can really, you know, perhaps they're not rocket science, but that can really make a difference.
Yeah, so it's the people, you know, the local people that you see employed, and that's who I, you know, when people ask what is social value locally, I want to be able to say Jake is social value. You know, I think 17-year-old now an apprentice on site, has been there a year, and then there's Sharon, who was I think used to work in the theatre, then was furloughed, then made redundant, and then came into our site to do some training, employed. She's now a hoist operator. I don't think she ever envisaged being a hoist operator on a construction site back in 2019. And she lives on the street, you know, on White Street, so just around the corner from Edward Street. So yeah, right next to the site. So, you know, these really are sort of local people that are benefiting from this. And then also, it's trying to, you know, there was a community group with that were interested in a piece of grass land at the end of a terrace row of houses. And it's like, we want to do something with this grassland because it's just unloved, but you know, it's a green space for us. So we've supported them in turning that into a community garden. So trying to get some water on site, getting a bench on site, trying to help them with gardening and providing them with some equipment to put into that garden as well. And it's things like that. Just, you know, we've got resource and skills on our side that can be benefiting the local community. Fairly small things for us and costs that we can usually absorb that end up being, you know, big things for the community, and things that either would have taken a long time or a lot of money or a lot of work that can just be done fairly easily just with joining the dots. And
Yeah,
that's what it is connecting the dots.
I just want to pick up on that point. So there was a question earlier in the session that related to, you know, you mentioned kind of charities and causes and matching up with businesses, and how, you know, from your point of view, you do it from a needs assessment in terms of the local area. How did that example of the community group kind of happen? Did they see your plan and go, right, we must talk to you? Or were you very proactive in reaching out to local organisations? How did that start? Because I think a lot of people, you know, are interested in how charities can connect with businesses, but it's what's that first step? Who makes the first move, Liam?
Yeah, we were talking to a lot of those people anyway. The benefit, I suppose, of the benefit of social value in the built environment, especially at such an early stage of a planning application, is that you're talking to the community anyway to consult with them on your plans. So you can almost embed social value within that consultation. So as well as saying, and increasingly we're doing this, as well as talking about, you know, here are our plans, what do you think? We're also saying, what's it like to live in this neighborhood? You know, what are the challenges for you in this neighborhood? What would you like to see improved? You know, what? So you can ask them quite general, high-level questions that then feed into the social value framework as well. And that's been really useful, that anecdotal feedback, because I think on earlier social value statements, it all tended to be desktop-based. So it was all very policy-driven. But now we've got some really good qualitative feedback from those consultations. And we also use an online consultation tool now called Give My View. And usually if we've got 100 to 200 people responding to a consultation, then a planning application would be very happy. Now we're getting 5,000-6,000 people respond. So that enables you to reach out to a wider audience and ask those questions to a wider audience. So a huge sample size that we're able to, a huge sample size of qualitative data that we're able to put into our social value statement. So yeah, and in terms of, you know, the social isolation amongst older people, that was actually an issue within within our area, within the Edward Street quarter. And yeah, we put on a dinner, luckily winter 2019, so when it was last allowed, a Christmas dinner for older people in the area, and that was run by a local community group. So, you know, we paid for the dinner and venue, and increasingly we'll be back on to trying to sort of run events and things like that. And just trying to use our community liaison officer as well as on the construction site to keep in touch with older people around the site in particular, who A, because of coronavirus, but B, just, the noise and construction disruption, and trying to make sure that these people are all right. Do they need a taxi to go to the hospital, or do they need a taxi to go to a cafe far away from the site to get away for a bit? So just trying to be friendly and neighbourly.
Yeah. I on the point about consultation and talking and that anecdotal evidence, I think I see that on a much more local, on a hyper local level within networking in Brighton Chamber, for example. We are, we have a mixture of charities, social enterprises and businesses all mixing together and connecting and kind of learning. And I think just through conversations that you have with people, and also looking at data, you can start to build a picture about what are the real challenges in the community, and if they match up with your vision for your business. I think, kind of building on networking and have those conversations can really move the dial forward and get people connected to the right causes that they want to make a difference on. So that's just my take on a smaller level.
You're right.
Yeah.
And Brighton's a great place for that. Brighton's a place where people do talk to each other, unlike London. And, they care for the community, and talking to businesses through the chamber. For instance, we know that there's a passion for social value amongst the businesses that might end up, calling the Edward Street Quarter their home. And one of the things that we've tried to look at is how do we support that sort of civic mindedness within, especially sort of smaller, more independent business, and how do we enable them to use the facilities that we provide for community use potentially. So, like, if the cafe closes at 6 o'clock, how can that cafe open up for, I don't know, an English, English course or something like that for local residents, or that might be an art class. And how do they publicise that? We're looking at having an app for the Edward Street Quarter site as well, where people can sort of, broadcast and signpost activities and information, not just for people who are living and working at the Edward Street Quarter, but also for the community around it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I'm just checking the list of questions. Oh, I know. You picked out a couple of stories about local employment success stories. Kind of going back to your question about measurement, how important are those more qualitative? Because we all want figures. You all, I'm sure your investors want figures as well about, what's the sea change that this will create in the business. But how important is it to tell those personal, individual stories? Because in essence, we're all just made up of individuals. And do you count that as one of your measurement kind of tools?
It doesn't count as apart from them being local, and apart from their sort of their entrance, i.e. from unemployment or from education, which that counts towards them.
Yeah. Oh.
Apart from that, there isn't, a sort of special measurement for different people. But in terms of, can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, you just dropped out for a little bit, so we just lost you. Okay. There isn't a specific measurement, but go for it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there isn't a specific measurement, but those people are so valuable in improving the worth of social value and showing the local community that, this isn't just talk, it's action. And there are opportunities for local people on our construction site. But actually, I think in terms of the lifespan of our sort of social value framework, construction is only 20% of it. We're envisaging 80% of the public benefit to be through operation of the site. So that's, not just the jobs, but the improvements to sort of health and well-being and the environmental improvements as well that site will deliver, through sustainable local travel plans and things like that. So there's a lot of good stories to come, and also, £9 million worth of social value, and these nice local stories. But this is in a year, where we suffered a global pandemic. We could have done so much more, and I'm sure it would have been, a much bigger figure that we would be talking about. So we've got a lot of catching up to do. So we don't want to sort of rest on our laurels. So we need to get back out there as soon as we're allowed.
Yes.
And get involved with the local charities and community groups, and also, try and make sure that we're being really proactive locally with colleges and the probation service and job centre and the council, trying to get the right people into employment and training.
Yeah, absolutely. And how apt that one of the buildings is next to the job centre. So there we go. You mentioned social isolation as a specific kind of need that you identified as part of Edward Street Quarter. One of the questions that's come through is if you've got any other examples or factors or challenges that you have kind of responded to. Is there anything else that stood out for you in terms of what, I know you've mentioned a myriad of them, but is there anything else you wanted to share on that?
Yeah, youth unemployment and aspiration is a big one as well. So that's why we've tried to be really proactive in terms of how we can work with the college and the council to make sure that we're creating pathways for local young people into employment. Obviously, a lot of those initiatives now have been video calls and things like that, which never work as well as face-to-face, particularly with the younger demographic. But yeah, so that's something that we're trying to achieve as well. I'm working with the Tana project as well, who work with a lot of local younger people and a primary school as well. So we sponsored a big sort of City Reads event last year that helped. I think it created a free ebook for everyone in the city from a local author, and also provided a free hard copy of the book for local primary school children as well, to sort of get them into reading and try and support that sort of educational attainment and aspiration.
Fantastic. Well, I've only got one final question, and this is that if somebody wanted to find out a bit more about the social value that you're delivering at a specific site that First Space have, how do people go about and find out what's kind of happening? Is it on the site? Is it on your website?
Yes, so it's on the First Space website under social value, so you can find out what we set out to do, and a recent update on what we've done in Brighton and our other projects as well. And the McLaren are our construction partners at the Edward Street Quarter, and they have a sort of micro site mainly focused for the community in terms of providing construction updates. But they're also developing a social value page which will explain what social value is, explain what our framework and our approach to social value is, and then begin reporting regularly on the social value that's being delivered. Hopefully that'll be up and running very soon.
Fantastic, thank you so much. We'll share a link to excuse me, we'll share a link to the First Space website so that you can all check that out, because there's only so much you can say in an hour, and especially when it comes to measurement of social value. Yeah, please feel free to have a look at that. I'm just checking my list.
Amy, just quickly while you're doing that. Oh, sorry, Liam, what was the tool called? Was it Goodnight View, the one that you mentioned?
Oh, sorry, yeah, givemyview.com.
Give My View.
What it does is it pushes out questionnaires through social media, but it's a bit more complicated than that because anyone can do that. But they're very engaging questionnaires, and to incentivize people to complete the questionnaires, they win points. Basically, every question they answer, they win a few points, and then they can spend those points on a local charity, which then we donate money to incentivize people to respond to our consultations. But it's also it helps us drive. Basically, we just didn't hear from anybody in their 30s or 40s before we did this. So when we used to run public consultation events in community centres or village halls, and it tended to be, if a lot of people in their 30s or 40s who might be working or have children, or actually just wanted to do much more exciting things with their Tuesdays or Wednesday evenings than come along to our exhibitions and have their say. This makes it a lot easier because they can just scroll down while they're on the bus or at home, if they're on Facebook or Instagram, just, answer the questionnaire, which is very short, very engaging. And then they feel nice because they've donated some money to charity. Everyone's a winner.
Thanks so much. Fantastic. I am going to wrap this up. So I just wanted to say a very big thank you to everybody today for your questions, for attending, and a very big thank you to you, Liam. For those of you that are new to Brighton Chamber, we're a membership organisation that exists to help businesses thrive in Brighton and beyond. So if you found today's session useful and you're not yet a member, you may want to check out what else we do, our events calendar, and look up what the benefits are about being part of our community. And just link to today, some of the, I wanted to shout out about an event that we have on the 15th of July. So we are running an event called Smart Bidding, which is all about procurement, and we have some great speakers on that panel. So if you want to kind of have a masterclass in how to bid successfully and win pitches, then do come along to that workshop on the 15th of July. My colleague has popped the details in there as well. It's open to absolutely everyone. It's part of our Catch the Wave programme. So I think that links very nicely onto part of what we've been talking about today. So that is absolutely it from us. I just wish you a brilliant rest of the week, and hope to see you at another one of these Q&As again soon. So thank you so much to you all for coming. Have a good day.